bit of a spontaneous live, guys, so I apologize if I have caught you unaware, and I will forgive you for not joining me for the experience. But yeah, as I said, it was very spontaneous live. I was sitting down after dinner tonight, reading through some of the recent news stories that we've had, and I was very disturbed by one particular story that I wanted to share with you tonight. So I'll wait a few more seconds just to see if people can catch up, but I did that for you, Simone. Yes. I take notice to what you guys say when you comment. But yeah, so as I said, I'll wait a few seconds, but I kind of want to dive straight into it. I don't want to do an overly long live, but I wanted to go through a couple of the articles that I read that disturbed me a fair bit. So I will just go straight ahead and go for it. So I'm going to attach in the comments all of the articles that I'm going to be reading from, so that when I'm finished you can go through it, you can read it, and you can be as disturbed as I was. So the article that I'll start with, and excuse me not looking directly at you, I'm going to be reading off the screen next to me, but it's about an incident that happened in the UK with a minister, a pastor of a Baptist church over there. And you might have seen it. It's been published by Cauldron Pool. The heading is "Police Warn Pastor Not to Offend the LGBT Mob Who Threatened to Burn His Church Down and Violently Assault His Congregation." So, you know, a lot of the time you read a headline and then you go, wow, and you start reading, like, oh, it's not as bad. But if you actually read the article, it gets worse. So I'm going to read through it. So bear with me. But I think it's really important that you guys get the whole picture, so you know just how bad the situation, I guess, in the world is going at the moment. So without further ado, I shall go ahead. All right, so a pastor in the UK has been warned by police not to break the law by offending the LGBT mob who threatened to burn down his church and assault his congregation. So there's a pastor, a minister over in the UK, Josh Williamson of Newquay Baptist Church. And he received multiple threats from the LGBT advocates after he went online and became the target of these anti-Christian attacks. So he's actually an Australian-born minister who is over in the UK at the moment, leading a church over there. But it's, yes, Shira shirt. But anyway, it's important to know that he is from Australia, so that you understand where this actually heads in the direction of. So I will keep reading. The LGBT mob set their sights on Pastor Williamson after he responded to news that the Cornwall gay parade had been cancelled. So the minister posted in the comments section of the local news outlet on their Facebook page, he just simply posted "wonderful news." So he said wonderful news in relation to them saying that the gay pride parade had to be cancelled. So that was it. That's what started it. That was the catalyst, and it goes on from there. So according to Christian Concern, organisers of Cornwall Pride then searched Pastor Williamson's personal Facebook page, took screenshots of posts, tagged Newquay Baptist Church, and shared all the images to social media. So basically, it was like an attempted doxing. Like, they've gone on his personal page and they've started to share all of his things and tagged his church into it. So another user downloaded Pastor Williamson's family photos, and then photoshopped his head onto gay pornographic images and then shared them and distributed them online. Attached to these vulgar, disgusting photoshopped images were quotes like, "Let's burn a church." And someone said, "Babe, would you be mad if I burnt down a church?" So, as I said, all of these messages have been saved and photos have been taken, like screenshots. The article that I will attach, you can see them all there. They're all there. It's all legitimate. Yeah, so these people have been saying all that. Another comment was, "F you, New Key Baptist Church. Me and my gay pals are gonna come and have an orgy outside your door." Lovely. Another one. "Let's all mutually agree that if any of us get past this S, we are decking the C who handed it to us." Again, threats, intimidation, violence, crime. However, after all of this sort of went off online, Pastor Williamson reported the threats to the Cornwall police. And funny enough, they were the sponsors of the Cornwall Pride Parade. So the authorities told the pastor it was a complex situation and said they didn't believe the threats would materialize. So basically they said because they did not think that the threats would come true, there was nothing much that they could do about it. So I will digress because it gets even better. Police warned the minister, the pastor, to keep his views in a safe environment and to make sure that he didn't offend anyone in the LGBT community, because then he would be breaking the law, right? So he has come to the police and reported a series of abuse and threats and really graphic, disgusting images that were circulated of him, his personal pictures online, and the police have turned around and said, these threats aren't going to materialize, and you better watch what you say, and you better be sure to keep all of your Christian views in a safe environment so you don't offend these people, or else you might be committing an offense. Oh my goodness, honestly, the world we live in. Is it time for the rapture? Okay, so I will digress. Pastor Williamson told Christian Concern that his family and church community have been very concerned by the level of anti-Christian abuse and threats of violence they have received over the past few weeks. Fair enough. Just from what we have seen with those small bits, I would feel the same way. He has also given a statement to say, the police have not formally spoken to me about any hate crime or sought a witness statement to look at the various online comments which have included threats to burn down our church. Police haven't sought him for any further information. Andrea Williams, Chief Executive of the Christian Legal Centre, said this is not an isolated incident. It's becoming worryingly common in the UK to see threats and calls for violence against Christians for voicing their simple opposition to LGBT pride. Police forces should show Christians they take this seriously by protecting their free speech against mob threats rather than seeking to keep Christians quiet. Exactly. 100% agree with you, Andrea. The end of the article sort of ties it in by saying it's a dark day indeed when the police start protecting particular ideologies at the expense of what they ought to be protecting and preserving, which is our freedoms and our rights. Amen. That is exactly right. Now, the story doesn't quite end there. So after all of this happened and after all of this came out, it gets better. There's another article. I will attach it in the comments so that you can read it, follow on a bit easier, and go from there. But a new key councillor has written to Home Secretary, asking for the Australian-born pastor, the Josh Williamson, to be thrown out of the country for holding to a Christian view of sexuality. How is that? So it's gone from his church and himself being threatened. His face was photoshopped on gay porn and circulated online. His personal family photographs circulated online. They threatened to burn the church down. They threatened to deck the sea out. They threatened to have an orgy on the front doorstep and do all these sexual acts at church. And then a local councillor wrote to the Home Secretary saying that this particular minister needs to be thrown out of the country. His visa needs to be gone. They don't want him to minister and to run a church over in the UK anymore because of his Christian view of sexuality. So, according to a local news outlet, Councillor Stephen Hick called for the community to boycott and shun Newquay Baptist Church pastor, along with the congregation, after the church became subject to these targeted attacks. He actually said, and these are his quotes, this is what he said: "I call on every individual and business within Newquay to deny him and his church the ability to spread their odious message." So he's called upon the community to basically shun the minister and anyone who goes there from basically being able to function normally like you and I would in society. Do not interact with them. Do not allow them to use your premises, and do not accept their message. So he's saying, basically, they're not allowed to come into your shop and drink coffee. They're not allowed to come into your shop and ask, for some hardware material to do renovation. Who knows? They're basically saying they're not allowed to go into your business, shun them, don't serve them, and all of those sorts of things. It's absolutely pretty disgusting. So that's where it ended up. Now, I just wanted to finish with a few quotes that this particular minister said, and I think it's really good. It kind of ties it all together and sort of leaves some good questions that we should all ask ourselves. And I will start with this one. Okay. So Pastor Williamson said, "Is it tolerant to call for a pastor to be removed from the country and have his visa revoked? Is that tolerant? Is it tolerant to call on every individual and business within Newquay to deny him, me, and his church the ability to spread their odious message? Is it tolerant to tell business and members of the public to not interact with them or the church and do not allow them to use your premises? Do not accept their message?" Now, Pastor Williamson went on to say he has no intention of changing the Christian message to accommodate to bullies, and so he shouldn't. "We will not bow to this anti-Christian hatred and his racism. He can bully all he wants, but bullies should not be surrendered to. By God's grace, we will keep proclaiming Christ, even though this man engages in hate speech." Now, that's basically everything in a nutshell. So, you have this minister who is preaching the gospel, who is, leading and ministering a church. And you have, on the other spectrum, a mob of people who live by a very different worldview. So there are two worldviews, the Christian worldview and the worldview that the LGBT mob obviously are living by. So basically, you got to ask yourself the question: the left love to sort of put a badge on themselves. The left love to be labelled as tolerant. But if you have a look at just this one story, who's the tolerant one there? I guarantee you that if a member of the LGBT community wanted to start attending church and wanted to hear about the gospel and wanted to ask questions, I would almost guarantee, unless there's other circumstances involved, that a Christian minister would take the time to try and help any person of any background or any type of worldview. They would open their doors, so to speak, and minister to these people, but you have a very different group of people who want to shut down, shun, get the community in a mob and just attack Christians for their worldview. And it's always one way or the other for these sorts of people. They like to call people bigots, and by their very own actions, the only bigots are themselves. And I think it's really scary, because I think one thing that we really need to make sure we do is we don't have to accept or believe everybody's worldview, but we shouldn't hate people for their worldviews. We should care for people. We should hold on to our religious and our individual freedoms, because once that is lost, society is lost. You can't function on that. And yeah, I just want to sort of go through that story. It really bothered me that this is the place that we're in. And this apparently isn't an isolated incident. This happens all the time in the UK. And I'm sure there are many stories from other places around the world where this sort of treatment is going on. You have, I think if you have a look at all of these sort of religious figureheads around the world, the number one that is often used in movies or TV shows or ads or whatever that makes a mockery of them is always Jesus. It's always Christianity. You don't often see other religions that are dragged through the mud or made fun of or sort of cancelled, but it always seems to be Christianity that is always attacked, that is always targeted. And you know, I think it's really good that this particular minister has said he won't bow down to the bullies. He will keep spreading the gospel and the word of God, and I think we all need to do that. And whether you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, if this precedent is set now, it might not affect you personally if you're not a Christian, but this sort of mentality and this precedence will shift. It will always shift, because when you're a perpetual victim, you're always looking for something to be offended by. So you might not be offended right now about Christianity because you're not a Christian. You couldn't care less. But it will shift, because once they've successfully or whatever attacked that particular subject, they're going to move on to the next. And when they move on to the next, now that the precedent is set, it could affect you, and it could affect your individual freedoms, your freedom of speech, your right to have your own thoughts and your own ideas and to be able to express them. So, as I said, it's very scary that this is happening around the world. We're in 2020. We're supposed to be progressing, but I really dislike labeling the left as progressive, because it's not progressive, it is regressive. And the more the world takes on that particular worldview of the left, and the more that the world shifts to wokeness, the more we're actually regressing. We're losing our freedoms. We're losing the things that make our Western countries so great. The reason why people want to come, and that is because we can live freely and we can think for ourselves. So please read the articles. There's a bit more information in them than what I've said tonight, but I think that we have to start making people aware of what's going on, because it needs to get out there. We're censored. Everything is censored. So the more we talk about it with our friends and family, the more we try our very best to make this aware on the online world, I think is going to hopefully make a bit of a difference. because, yeah, we don't want to regress anymore. We actually do want to progress and get back our freedoms. So I'll quickly have a look at some of the questions that you guys may have sent through. Bear with me for a minute, sorry. I'm a bit behind on the questions. Russ, you asked, what are the police going to do about the threats? I'm actually not sure, to be honest. From what I've gathered, at the moment, it doesn't look like anything, but yeah, I guess watch the space if anything changes. I'm sure Cauldron Pool will 100% be following this up if something does come from it, either by the police or from what's going on. So I'm sure we'll find that out eventually. Exactly, James. How long until that becomes life for us here in Australia? You are exactly right. I mean, you only have to look at like what happens in America and Canada, and it usually follows suit. We're like the little brother to the bigger sort of Western countries, and we do usually follow suit. So I'll keep reading. Yeah, Mick said it's a spiritual battle, good versus evil. It won't be long, and evil will not need to disguise itself. Yep. Okay. All right. Yeah, you're right, Mick. What used to hide in shadows now walks proudly down Main Street. That is 100% right. And that's exactly what I was saying. We aren't progressing, we are regressing. And it's done by normalizing this sort of thing. It's done by desensitizing people to certain other worldviews. And they do it through language, through TV, through education. And slowly they chip away at it, and yeah, we get desensitized, and then once we're desensitized, it becomes the normal. It becomes normalized, and then, as you said, Mick, it just walks plainly down Main Street, and that's how we got to where we got today. And it is getting worse, and we need to start speaking up, because I don't want the next generation or the generation after them to have to live in a worse place than what we are now. It's bad enough for us. If it keeps regressing, it's a pretty terrifying place for our kids and their kids to grow up in. So anyway, I might leave it at that. I've probably spoken again, probably a bit too long, sorry. Unless anyone has any last questions, I'm going to wrap it up. And yeah, I just need to figure out how to turn this thing off. But yeah, anyway, thank you for joining me, and hopefully I can do another live again soon. Anyway, I will